Welcome, viewers and listeners, to Island Vibes, a weekly podcast where we look at things Caribbean, the islands, the people, their culture, the politics, their way of life. Today, we will be looking at Dominica and two issues that are quickly becoming a growing pain for the relevant authorities there and for residents alike. I will be offering some suggestions by way of solutions that can hopefully bring some resolution to some of the issues. The two issues in question are one, the increase in traffic congestion into and within the city of Roseau. And the second one is the increase in the number of vehicular accidents on the island, particularly fatal accidents that claim the lives of our young people, more so the lives of our young men. I will offer a few suggestions I think that are workable and practical and things that can be done in the interim. To begin with, the city of Roseau, built centuries ago, designed and built centuries ago, it doesn't leave much room for expansion. We have very narrow streets, we have very narrow sidewalks, and very little egress between the sidewalks and the houses. The houses are pretty much onto the sidewalks are pretty much right there on the road. So that doesn't leave much room for widening or expanding our roads. Over the years, we have also had an increase in the number of vehicles being imported on the island, used vehicles, because we have an increase in ownership of vehicles. A lot more young people are purchasing vehicles right now. They're purchasing the used vehicles. And so with an increase in the volume of vehicles on the island, narrow streets, quite naturally, we're going to expect an increase in congestion. We also have, coming from the north, one way into town via the Kinfield Cliff. Coming from the south, one way into town via Newtown. The narrow sidewalks in the city of Roseau, a lot of them are uneven, some of them are dilapidated as well. And we also have the issue where pedestrians, not wanting to use the broken sidewalks, choose to actually walk on the streets. That creates a lot of congestion as well. Within the city, we also have an increase in the number of reserved parking spots that are allotted to business places, creating an issue of parking within the city as well. On the days that we have cruise ships in port, this compounds everything. Coming from the north, right outside of the port, with the officers trying to get vehicular flow out of the port, with the cruise passengers. They also create a congestion for traffic coming from Kinfield via the Kinfield Cliff. And from the south, when there's a cruise ship in town in Roseau, there's a diversion of traffic away from the bayfront that also creates congestion within the city of Roseau. Recently, the authorities, in an attempt to try and resolve some of these issues, proposed an increase in the cost of the reserve parking spots allotted to business places. And in my view, I don't think that is going to cause any improvements in the traffic woes that we have and the congestion. I don't think it's going to create much of a difference, because one of two things can happen. The people who already have those available parking, reserved parking spots, they decide to pay the increase in the in the cost of for the cost of those reserved parking spots. Nothing changes. If they decide they're not paying for it, or a few decide they will pay, a few decide they're not paying, all you're doing is pretty much just making a few parking spots available. The congestion still remains the same. I have a few suggestions. Like I said, I think that are practical and workable. One would involve the building of parking facilities. On the north of Roseau, I think we could look at a spot somewhere in Pottersville. On the south, somewhere Lale Coco, right next to that hotel that was recently opened. I think it's Oasis. Some land could be reclaimed, in that vicinity to erect another of the parking garages. Drivers coming into town from either direction can be made to pay for parking at those facilities. Whatever fee that is determined by the relevant authorities, drivers pay that fee, and this gives you a ticket for a shuttle service, a free shuttle service into town. Whether you go to town for work or it could be used for school children as well. You could also have designated shuttle services to the schools in town for students and either direction into and out of town. That is one suggestion. People who choose not to pay for parking at those garages should be made to pay a toll going into town across all of the 4 bridges in and out of town. The other suggestion is using parking meters within the city of Roseau with time restrictions on them. So people, for example, that are working in town, they may choose either to pay at the parking meter or they may choose to pay at the garages, at the parking garages on the extremities of town. And people that are in town for a short stay can also pay at those parking meters. This, both of these situations will help and will create much revenue for the authorities. So these, I think, are just two practical and workable. These are just a few, practical and workable solutions, I think, in the interim. In terms of the access into and out of town, this requires a lot of long-term planning because on the north of the island, there's not much room for expansion of roads or new roads. A bypass could be practical, but more so from the south of the island, from Somelari Coco into town. We could make that bypass one way and the existing road another way, and we could choose whichever goes into and whichever goes out of town. But a bypass could be practical from here, somewhere going into town, say probably somewhere around by the library. You could make this like a one way, and the existing street make it a one way as well in the opposite direction. From the north, it won't be that practical for a bypass. For one, you have the cruise ship berth right there, so a bypass into town would have to consider where the cruise ships will access the port coming into town. So these are things that for the long term. But some of the suggestions I offered can I think be workable and practical. Moving to the second issue, which is the increase of the number of accidents, fatal accidents in Dominica, particularly involving our young men. There are a few suggestions that I have that can be practical. For one, speed limits, the enforcement of speed limits, posted and enforced speed limits. We need to enforce the helmet laws and seatbelt laws. The authorities need to do that. Drivers doing, new drivers, it should be mandatory that new drivers take a defensive driving course or safety driving course. The people, especially where it involves accidents, we need to start looking at testing people for alcohol, like the overuse of alcohol, those sobriety tests. The equipment for that, breathalyzer tests, all of this, those things can be obtained quite easily. Speeding is another thing we could look at. The police authorities can get the speed gun, the speed radars to look for people that are speeding. Speed bumps can work But you know, that itself can create traffic backup as well, and because it actually slows down the traffic. I think we need to look at some of these things, speed guns, speed, the radars. We need to look at enforcing seatbelt laws, helmet laws, mandatory safety driving courses for particularly new drivers, and the penalties for accidents, especially those involving reckless drivers or drunk drivers. We need to look at increasing the penalties to deter people from reckless driving. But these are all practical and practicable solutions. I think that we can look at, and things that we need to enforce going forward. So I do hope that these suggestions can be considered, and we can find a way forward in addressing these two major issues plaguing Dominica in terms of the traffic congestion and the increase in the number of accidents. I mean, with the increased volume of vehicles, we expect an increase in the volume of accidents, but some of those accidents can be avoided if certain things are enforced. And I think that is the way we need to go forward. So until next time, till the next episode, do have a pleasant day, everyone.